All right. Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for coming. This is session 5. We get break after this. This is Jenna, Gegg, and Lucas Paratore.
There you go.
Yes, got it right. Please express your welcome.
Cool. All right, getting started. Hey, everybody. So, here to talk to you a little bit about culture and governance and how you can kind of take a step back, thinking about your organization and kind of what your priorities are from a culture perspective. Is it visibility? Is it a competitive environment? And how can you kind of take the rules that you have created and then get people to actually care about them? So I'm on the product team at Cloud Health. I've been there for about 6 years, and one of the things I feel like people talk a lot about in FinOps is your career and how you got to this place. So just to kind of understand where I started, I was initially an engineer, moved on from support to be a tactical engineer, really understanding challenges customers are facing, trying to build automation. That as companies scale, they might be able to tell the rules to some people, but then somebody else joins, and they didn't get the email to be onboarded. And so being able to create some guardrails like that through automation is something that really fires me up. And I'm joined here by...
Hello, everyone. I'm Jenna Gegg. I'm currently with Salesforce as a public cloud cost manager. Kind of came to Salesforce via Tableau. Salesforce acquired Tableau. I continued in my role at Tableau and then transitioned into a role at Salesforce, which has been very interesting because if you can imagine, their cloud spend is quite large and very complex environment. And you're probably lucky you got out of support before I was a customer.
I believe it.
Got a lot of tickets.
I believe it. Great. So quick agenda. I'll just give a quick introduction of what Cloud Health is. I think there's a couple other cloud management platforms here this week, so you may see those. We'll do a couple things about the benefits of governance, types of policies that you could create, and then really get into the carrot or stick. How can you motivate people by enticing them with incentives or by, unfortunately, sending some nasty emails or making some budget cuts to be able to really get people to take action? So Cloud Health, we've been doing it for 10 years. We've been in this space. Really, something that people don't always know about is that we operate in 2 different markets. We have direct customers we work with, like a Salesforce, and then we work with partners like an Accenture, where they're able to use our engine, our platform, wrap their own service around it, repackage it, and then sell that to their customers. The cloud maturity curve. So this is something very similar to the inform, operate phases of FinOps. Here, where we like to talk about is you start with visibility. And this can be applied at a micro level, at a macro level. You could say, all right, EC2, start to realize I'm spending too much. I need to start optimizing it. I need to purchase savings plans. I need to right size. Maybe then you start to figure out what I want to know is true cost of a resource, including licensing, networking. Maybe I am pulling in other SaaS solutions. Being able to understand what those true KPIs that your organization cares about, and then moving along in that journey. Any kind of thoughts about Salesforce and your journey in this?
Yeah, I would definitely add that you kind of see the different areas of this, of financial management, operations, and security, and you might be in various stages depending on the different areas. So for example, at Salesforce, our #1 value is trust. So you can imagine that our security and compliance, we're a lot more mature in that area, and the financial management and operations piece, are kind of trailing behind, but things that we're now focusing on. So just to say that your company's priorities and values definitely are going to have an impact of what your journey is going to look like.
Yeah, it might also be the person that's a team that's in charge of running that CCOE, that Cloud Center of Excellence. And maybe the priority, you come from a finance background, and that's really want to start making those investments. So that's really, I think, where it becomes interesting for FinOps is it's such a new industry. Nobody's been doing this for 30 years. They're doing other professions or other departments, and so they're bringing those learnings as their careers have built into this new industry. So governance, a couple benefits. We'll start getting into the fun stuff in a little later, but the first thing it allows you to do is drive consistent best practices. So if you're able to automate these things, whether it's through something like a Terraform or some sort of policies in a native cloud provider, you're able to create these best practices and drive those through your organization. It also allows you to save money at scale. As you grow the cloud, very elastic, you continue to spend more money as you release new applications, it's really hard to keep up with that. And if you're constantly telling people through words, through emails, hey, you got to be adding these tags, hey, you got to add these labels, it's going to grow up. You're not going to be able to handle it. And people are going to be wasting money, and you're going to burn some bridges with friends that you thought you had. And then lastly, you can reclaim employee time. You can have those people that used to be worried about adding tags. Now those things are added through Terraform, through a script. So you have the ability to now focus on what you want to work on and not managing a cloud environment.
Yeah, I think I would just add to that, you might not have governance out of the gate or automation out of the gate, but it's something that continually working on and working towards to free up that employee time. It also probably has some really great security benefits as well.
Absolutely. So some best practice policies. We only have a limited amount of time, so we'll focus on these 3 here. But we'll also, especially for cost optimization, get into that a little bit around operational governance, because there is a lot of opportunity to save money while building in those types of guardrails. We'll also talk around for asset and configuration management, get a little bit into chargeback and showback, and how there are different reasons to potentially do that tagging. So first, financial management, creating alerts on cost policies, being able to be alerted if you're approaching a budget. I mean, for you guys, especially in visibility, this is probably something that resonates strongly with you.
Absolutely, yeah, and I have a finance background, so I'm all about managing to the budget.
Yeah, great. And we'll think about things not at just a macro level, a total spend, but also at a per service spend, maybe at a per region, being able to help identify these changes at a both, again, micro and macro level. And then another thing as well is around budgeting. So this is something that we see a lot of customers, if you hit 100% of budget, it's too late. You need it to know at 50%, maybe you got a warning, 75%, you got a, hey, you look into this, and then once you get into those 90s, maybe you're getting an email every day to really let you know, hey, you're gonna break that budget. All right, operational governance. This is really near and dear to my heart. This is where you can start to save money, build these things at scale, and set in these rules. And everybody can Google and say, how long should I have my unattached disks for? Whatever, 60 days, 90 days, 13, I don't know, whatever your organization is. But to actually get people to do that is really difficult. You said some really interesting things about your journey in getting people to actually take action. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say in both my experience at Tableau and Salesforce is definitely more of an informing stage and letting people know what's out there. We never take any automation to clean up resources on our own. I think it relates back to sort of that trust. And we would rather have the teams decide, if they want me to stop bugging them about their unattached volumes. It provides some incentive to write their own script to go out and clean their environments so that I stop bothering them. But we take a look at these things regularly, and centrally, the team that I sit on is centralized, and be able to provide that visibility. And once you start providing that visibility on a regular basis, people start getting more interested. They start asking questions. Okay, how can I get this information on my own? Like, how can I self-service? So I see that having this, being consistent with the data and what you're presenting, or if you're setting up policies, having that consistency really helps drive action in that area.
I think that's an example where the culture of Salesforce, that works. Not all organizations visibility and emails are enough. Maybe you really have to build in those destructive actions that say, if you don't tag this, we're shutting this down at 5 p.m. on Friday, no matter what. So definitely something that's important to really think about your culture and what's going to take action. But I think that first step in visibility is a good start. Another thing you can do is create start-stop policies to be able to save money, especially for development environments. And this is something we see a lot of organizations rolling out initially. Maybe one business unit uses it, and they use a tag that's AutoScheduler. And then another business unit finds out. And they say, oh, wow, you're able to save that much money. All I have to do is add a tag to that, and then we have actions that'll take that. And that's a way that you can kind of land and expand within an organization. Try to create champions that are going to be the ones that have high visibility and will be able to evangelize the things that you're trying to do and be able to get some teammates on your side. Because it can be difficult sometimes. I mean, you're kind of talking about it nagging, you're kind of the one that are telling people, change your process. Maybe you need to put more of an emphasis on finance when you've been just writing code for your whole lives. So burning bridges is the wrong word, but you really have to be careful with as you deliver these messages. All right. And then asset configuration management. So you probably know you should add tags. Now, what level of the hierarchy to add those tags? Maybe that's a question you want to ask. Should you add it at the resource, at the account? If you're in Azure, at the resource group level. Maybe you're adding it for cost allocation purposes. You've added these environment, these owner tags, and then you're able to perform chargeback or showback based off of those tags. Maybe another reason I mentioned is around being able to take action in governance. And you want to have some sort of auto-scheduling tag on it so that your policies know to start and stop those resources. Maybe another interesting thing that we hear a lot of our customers is about quantifying savings and be able to justify how much money I've been able to save with these ventures. And one way that you can do that is anytime you're going to take an action on a resource, you could add a cost-saving tag to it. And then you're able to, after you've done all these things, aggregate up the cost, be able to now start to quantify how much money you've been able to save.
One thing that I've done with around tagging is after I've notified an individual or team about resources that have optimization efforts is put a tag on the asset so that it's an easy way to know, oh, did I already contact this person about this resource? How long has it been sitting out here? So I have my certain tag key that I use along with the date that I contacted them. You can get an idea of like how long an opportunity's been sitting out there. So if you're over budget, I can remind you I've been telling you about these opportunities for 6 months. It'd be a good time to act on them. So tags can serve lots of purposes. I think as it relates to tagging compliance, what I would add is that it is very useful for engineers to understand why you're asking them to put certain tags on. Like sometimes they're financial tags. That's not doing much for them, but there are a number of tags that maybe they would want to implement that are meaningful. So I've found that having, if you do have a tagging standard, make it clear why you're asking for these tags and how they can be leveraged, and additionally encouraging teams to have, even their own standard that they're going to be able to use as it relates to cost or whatever else they want to look at, like metrics and things like that. Tagging can be very powerful.
Yep, that makes sense. All right, now let's talk about how to actually motivate people. So we've talked about some policies. Wait, go. Oh, there we go. So carrots and sticks. Making friends, enticing people, but also maybe, hopefully not burning any bridges. So the first thing, Jenna's obviously been talking a lot about this, it's creating visibility. So most people, hopefully, are good-natured and want to do the right thing, but there are also people that want to watch the world burn and aren't as concerned about savings, and they're like, yeah, I've been getting an email from Jenna, she's super nice, 6 months you're going to ignore her, like what? So you really have to know like what is important from a visibility perspective and be able to surface that. Now, one thing you have to watch out about is maybe it will create competition. And that's something that you should think about. Is that going to be embraced in your organization? Are there going to be teams that when they see they're in last place, are they going to be discouraged or are they going to be encouraged to be able to try to take first place back? So that's another thing to think about is with this visibility, especially across your organization, what do you gain or potentially lose by doing that? There's also personal incentives, bonuses, things like that. Maybe an engineer. For me as a PM, if I can save enough money, get an extra engineer, that's the dream right there. Get some more features. So being able to try to incentivize people at a bonus perspective or at an engineering kind of within the organization. And the last thing is gamification. So we have customers that will have quarterly competitions, whichever team save the most money each quarter get to go out on a barbecue. One of them, like they go out and do a whole barbecue thing. I'm sure other companies do cooler things, but that's the kind of first thing that comes to mind. And yeah, I mean, any kind of thoughts before we move over to sticks on any ways you've been able to motivate?
Oh, in the positive category of carrots, I think, first step is always creating that visibility. You don't know what you can't see. And I like to think people mostly want to do the right things. So often that's kind of enough to get things moving. I also always want to, again, coming from my finance background, quantify if it's a cost opportunity, what is the cost that's sitting out there? And so that they can decide, okay, how important is this? Prioritize it within their backlog. Yeah.
Great. And that's also an area where you can start to build trust and build friends. Like, this is going to be a time where you can start to motivate people and not have to be sending those emails when we get over to the stick side. And maybe you start to think about these 4 as pretty chronological. Maybe step 1 is you're creating that visibility, but it's just an email. And that could be a direct email to the owner. Really benign, you're not guilted, you don't feel bad about it. Maybe then the next step is no actions taken, it goes to your manager with you on CC. That is not the best look. You don't want to be getting a lot of those. And then maybe it goes even worse, up to like a business department level, and they're getting a quarterly report of all the people that are not following the compliance. So not just that, potentially a daily, there are like reports that could be coming out quarterly that would be motivating you potentially as a stick. Another thing, and this is one that it could be potentially maybe a middle ground, I wouldn't necessarily call it a stick, but this is one of my biggest advices to people trying to create and set standards, is look at what types of established tools you have, Jira, ServiceNow, tools like that, and how can you integrate into those that already have an established process. Engineers know to log in, look at their Jira tickets. They know the statuses of Jira tickets, moving things along boards. So if you can get into their systems and speak their language, it's going to be the least amount of friction for you versus trying to say, hey, everybody, you need to now start logging into a new platform versus I want to take that new platform data and put it into an existing system.
I'll add to that. Engineers don't check their emails. So luckily, I'm mostly emailing the engineering managers. So that's been really successful. Tableau, they use Jira. They also use the dev team uses a different tool at Salesforce. Their dev teams use a different tool. But understanding how the dev teams work and getting into into the backlog. I also recommend getting to know the like Scrum Master or PM, pinging them, hey, I got a ticket for you, and always asking if the on-call could have a look at it. If it's something that's like should be a really quick cleanup exercise, like I don't know, unattached volumes or something of that nature. Like you said, you develop a little trust, it can kind of go a long way.
Slack, another huge one. Create a Slack message, and that platform's taken over, and nowadays, that's a big integration that we see customers trying to pull in notifications for. Public shaming. This is really where the culture needs to be considered very carefully. Some companies, that's okay. Giving people a little SHIT for not doing a good job may be part of the culture. Other ones, that's not it. You do not want to give people any grief for doing this in a public forum. So definitely something to really think about your organization, maybe even at a team level. You could do it. You create a little competition, public shaming-esque on a team that will go over well, and that's something to think about is how broad you can do that. And then the last is the really deadly stuff, and those are budget cuts. So guess what? You spent too much in this account, we're shutting this thing down. You're spinning up resources that are outside of the compliance in terms of you're spinning up an X132X for development. I don't think you need that much processing for that type of resource. So budget cuts, although difficult, are effective. Very, yeah. I mean, I don't know, you guys don't get to that level at Salesforce, right?
I mean, you got to cut the budget from time to time, yes. I don't think that we ever go out and just say, no, these resources, but definitely examples like within Tableau, we use Tableau support, they reproduce customer issues, and I think in that environment, we use the AWS service catalog and have a selection of instances that they can choose from so that they just don't go spin up the largest thing that they can get their hands on with the most storage. So that's one way that we kind of help keep that, the cost of that a little bit lower.
Yeah, that's a really interesting trend that we've started to see in the market as well as organizations that are, especially if they're a really engineering organization. Maybe they want to develop their own cost management, cloud management platform, but they want to pull in data from other native cloud providers, from Cloud Star, cloud providers as solutions. And so being able to kind of have one central place where you send people for that first high-level view, and then if they want to drill into the details more, they could then go to that other platform. But being able to really take those metrics, knowing your organization, and creating some sort of landing page is something that we're really starting to see more and more in the market. Yeah. Let's see. I think we're at it right now. So open for Q&A to anybody here.
Oh, I think we did pretty good on time.
Minutes.
Awesome, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Lucas and Jenna? Okay, here we go.
So based on your experience, a lot of the things that could result in cost savings could be proactive, right? Like, I mean, you can have policies, compliance. Like in our end, we use a lot of Azure blueprints in order to maintain those checks and balances. I think you mentioned that some of the instance levels could be limited from the get-go, right? So you won't, the engineering team won't have access to those unless there is a special approval to use those high cost instances. So can you share some experiences there?
Yeah, I'm sorry, do you mind like saying it another way? So, yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So have you implemented any measures that would be a little bit more proactive in limiting any unnecessary costs and automating it to a certain extent, right?
Yeah, so I would say we're more on the reactive side in that regard, where we're using the native cloud provider APIs we see, and then being able to kind of collect that data as often as possible. I'm not sure as much how we're not as much a Terraform type of solution to be able to more proactive in that regard.
Yeah, I would say I've seen it more. I mean, if you can imagine, Salesforce is a pretty large company made up of lots of companies. So if I think about like back when I was focused on Tableau and Tableau Online, something that they did within their development environments is setting up sort of that template for, in a development environment, these are the sizes of instances that we recommend you use. In production, those instances are going to look a lot different, but before you have any visibility and you can even see that. That's something that came from those conversations of like, wow, your development costs are very, very large compared to production costs. What's going on here? Oh, it opens up that conversation and opportunity, and then we leave it up to the engineering teams then to build out whatever capability makes sense for them in terms of that governance.
Yeah, and one thing to add to that, what we'll see with customers doing is they'll have override tags. So maybe they're not allowed to spin up large instances for development, but if you add override equals true, then they'll be able to skip certain policies that you may have been creating. So that's a big thing that we'll see companies doing.
I haven't seen that tag before. That's probably okay, though.
That's a good idea. I like that.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay.
So I'm newer to FinOps, and I just had a question. One of the things that I see is how do you sort through all the noise associated with anomaly alerting, budget alerting, getting product teams to engage? You talk about it's hard to get responses sometimes from engineering, but I think part of that is, at least from what I've seen, is there's so much noise. So trying to kind of get your head wrapped around what is the right level of alerting and notification.
The first thing is start small. Find one area, one business unit, one part of the budget that you can really lock down and figure out the process, and then land and expand. That's really the biggest thing that I see companies trying to do. I mean, even with the cloud, they're like, I'm going to be 100% in the cloud in 3 years. It's like, try to think about one of your applications that is the most modernized, and then take a reset and think about it. So it's really, once you do something, taking a pause and really learning from it to see how that impacted and if it's aligned with the culture. Something that I see.
Yeah, I think to build off that is maybe looking at your scope. So I don't know if you're necessarily like, okay, we're trying to manage cost to a budget, focus on areas where they're over budget, sit down and have some conversations, because most often teams know things and levers that can be pulled, except they've got a lot of other things to do. So sometimes that can be, I think, effective, is sitting down with a team that is willing and kind of easy to work with and learn from them and take it from there. But depending on what your goal is, I think, yeah, starting small and then building off of that, because if you try to do it all at once, that's going to be absolutely overwhelming.
Because you are going to require probably process changes. And in general, people are resistant to things like that. So it is just something to really ease in and, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Awesome. There you go. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. John Hamilton with Bungie. Have you all come up with effective ways so that you limit cowboying on cloud spin up? Like certain teams that will just go and spin things up in the cloud without communication with IT or InfoSec or your dev, governance body?
Absolutely. The best way to get around that is to build as many types of guardrails you can. If somebody launches a resource like in Terraform that doesn't have specific things, don't let them do it. Being able to create a CMP like Jenna mentioned, where if you allow people to say, go to this page to launch resources, and there's only 10 types of resources there, then they can't launch the other ones. So being able to create that intermediary as well between the cloud provider, then you can be that layer to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, I think culture often will kind of play into how well something like that would be adopted. But I think having the visibility, so something like back when I was at Tableau, pulling a lot from examples there, to get an AWS account, you had to go sit with a cloud infrastructure team and talk to them about your use case, so they knew how to build out your account depending on public, private, subnets, all that kind of stuff. And once your account's created, we have an account owner assigned, and we send them weekly emails of their daily spend cost every week, just delivered to their inbox. Whoever is assigned as the account owner in the database, they're going to get an email so that they can start to get a look if there are spikes in costs start going higher. So they can't say, the account owner can't say they didn't see what was going on, but depending on the culture, you might be able to adopt something, where you're like, no, you get 3 choices, that's all you're going to get. But that's the problem with the cloud, right? It's so easy to spend money.
Yes, it is.
Come in. There you go.
Thank you. So regarding this, put a limitation on the amount of resources that is available to the architects and engineers. Sometimes you're gonna kind of put them in a brace and make them use resources that are more powerful than they need because they don't have another option. And how you do about that. And the second part is constantly the vendors, the cloud providers, are creating new resources, new SKUs that are more powerful, less costly, right? So how you handle this as well? Because we try to do that, but constantly they go around and they create whatever they need. So how you deal with that?
So, one way I'd mentioned there's destructive actions. And again, this is kind of a culture thing. Maybe this is too much. But you could say every day at 5 p.m., if somebody spins up a resource that doesn't match the specific instance types, that thing's going to be shut down. Maybe step 1 is you want to send an email to managers, say, hey, these people spun up these not allowed resource types. But sometimes you just got to take action and shut things down. What's your thought?
I would say the other thing that always give them the smallest option. Make sure you always have that available. The other thing I would say is also to be thinking about what your reserved instance strategy might be. Maybe you're in the savings plan world, and that's great, but that sometimes too can factor in what you want to be available. I think also the goal of the cloud, we have to keep that in mind and being open to. So if a new instance type comes out, maybe it makes sense. Maybe we should be promoting that to other people who are on different instance generations or family types.
But how about the over-provisioning because they don't have another option?
Give them the smallest option, T2 Nano.
That doesn't work for all.
Yeah.
But, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would say constantly evaluate from a right-sizing perspective as well. I mean, just looking at utilization and aligned with that, with what supported instance types you have. You may also have specific instance types only support for production versus development. That's another thing. Did you ever have to do that, or did you just really try to set instance types no matter what?
We do have automation with the instance sizes that we agreed with the architect. And that's what they stuck with. With overtime, they stuck at another need, so a need for new applications that were not there. So that's what happened. People flip from that.
So just some experience that I've seen, right? So it's a complicated question. I think what you've asked is somewhat similar to what he asked, and it's a fine balance. In some if you want to limit, and you can do that. I mean, even in VMware, there are tools like VR that allow you to do that. But then you have to have the central team that really does know exactly what kind of instance, because the fact of the matter is public clouds iterate at a very fast pace. And to keep up with the number of services, you got to have the central team that is really competent and knows about the different instance types and what makes sense for the environment. So if you want to put controls, I believe you have to have that central team that is sufficiently large who can keep up and know what to recommend. Otherwise, the better option is let the developers choose what they need to for their use cases, and what Lucas mentioned, which is then look at the optimizations, and if they're not really leveraging the full power, then suggest optimization, right? That's what I've seen works best. Yeah, absolutely. Right. If it's large, there's way too many departments, acquisitions, it's just hard, right? So, yeah, makes sense.
All right. Interesting. Does anybody else have any questions? Any questions? I think we've got a few more minutes for anything else.
No, I think we're at,
Right.
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock.
Okay, right, cool. Thank you ever so much, Lucas and Jenna. Thank you very much. All right, so I got 2 very important pieces of information for you, if I can speak. First of all, we're going to take a 30-minute break for some drinks and snacks and recaffeination. And secondly, if you enjoyed hearing from Jenna, then you are in luck, because in 30 minutes... You should have mentioned that like it's an empty room. No. If you didn't enjoy, be here anyway. If you enjoyed hearing from Jenna, she'll be back here in 30 minutes presenting again. So thank you very much, and I'll see you in half an hour.
JR here from the FinOps Foundation. Thank you for watching. Please go to FinOps.org if you want to get plugged into this amazing community. And of course, hit subscribe right here on YouTube to get all the future content. Hope to see you soon.